let me just introduce you, one and only, Dr. Mansur Hasib.
Words could not describe the feeling of friendship and kinship that we've developed in this very short period of time because of values. Because I think values create relationships between people, and you will see that leadership is all about embracing values. Now, one thing I'm going to also talk about, values also helps you establish personal brands. And this is important for every one of you who wants to be successful in life. You have to establish a personal brand around your passion. How do you do this? Very simple. Rima's video is on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So every one of you should go there, share that out. The beautiful thing about sharing out knowledge like that or information about other people with passion is that as you share them out, you will start to get known through association. What I'm going to talk about today is really about cybersecurity education. Why is this important? The fact that Willis College is adopting this in their curriculum, why do I think it's a game changer? Now, of course, I'm passionate about this, but I think you need to understand that reasoning also, because I sincerely believe that what Willis College has done is a game changer. And as other universities or colleges or institutions, it doesn't matter what the educational institution is, they need to adopt it, because if you think about it, what has happened? The world has changed. We are now living in a digital world where every company is a digital company. Every human being is a digitally enabled and empowered human being. Even some of your personal relationships are now through technology. And what has technology done? Allowed you to expand your markets. How did I get known globally? Through technology. I purposefully never spent a single dollar on marketing, because I wanted to prove to the world that it is possible to do modern marketing through just relationships with other leaders who are passionate about whatever it is that they're doing. So this is a key thing. So, education. What is wrong with education? That's the first thing I want to talk about. Here's the goal of education. People think that we go and learn some skills. Yes, we of course learn some skills. But guess what? All of those skills are going to be obsolete if you don't continuously learn. And what do leaders do? Leaders continuously learn. They're looking around for patterns, changes that are happening, technology that is going on, what other people are doing, and then they're learning. So the goal of any education, it doesn't matter what the level is to develop leaders. And leadership is not a position. So that's another concept I want to help you understand. That each of you, just because you came to this room, are actually leaders. Why? Because you made an investment in yourself. You want to learn, you want to gain, you took that trouble to come to this room. There are many people that won't take that trouble, even though it's free, even though there's a lunch being served. Right? This is all the time. So, but then that doesn't mean that you can't help them. Each of you also have a sphere of influence, and each of you need to touch others about leadership, because what has happened in the world, that we have so much wrong information being taught about leadership, that too many people think they're not leaders, they're followers. They're waiting for somebody in authority to tell them what to do. So this is a key goal of education, is to not only build other leaders, but also develop critical thinking. In other words, look at the problems and say, how can this problem be solved? If somebody says something, you just don't take it at face value. Sometimes you challenge. And through that constructive challenge, what can happen? New knowledge can develop. My own knowledge has been refined as I talked at various conferences with other thought leaders, business professionals, academics, Their influence helped me shape my work and my message better. For example, my definition of cybersecurity that I initially started with in 2014 had the word management in there. That word is horrible. Management is a horrible word. And I did not realize that at that time because I was so used to that terminology. But then I went to an information governance conference, a completely interesting group of people that does information governance. Through there I said, well, wait a minute, that's the word I'm looking for, governance. It's far better than management because governance actually allows innovation. Management suppresses innovation, as you will hear a little bit more today also. So we develop critical thinking. Another key skill that everybody in education, it doesn't matter what your level is or what education is, whether you're going to nursing, technology, it doesn't matter. You need to develop communication skills where other people can understand what you're saying. Very important. If your message is so complicated that other people don't understand it, that probably means you don't understand it well enough yet. So continue refining the message, and you will see that from the reaction that you get from people. So communication skills. So in my program that I run, in every class there are presentation components. And because a lot of it is online, what do? We make them stand in front of a camera, or they can narrate it, whatever method they use, because today technology allows you to be free. You prepare a narrated presentation and upload it. You want to upload it on video, YouTube, I don't care. But you have to learn to present. But it don't go 30 minutes, 1 hour. We want you to be able to present your ideas in 5 minutes. If you cannot present your ideas in 5 minutes, once again, you don't have a good message yet. Because you don't want to bore people. So that's the communication skills. The fourth thing that is very important is team building, interdisciplinary. Teams just don't happen automatically. You put a bunch of people together, that's not going to happen. So education, you will see that in many educational curriculum, they will give you a problem to solve, and they will give you a team to solve that problem with. In every one of our curriculum, it's all like that also. So that's another thing that you need to learn. How does teamwork happen? And of course, the thing that we were talking about is problem solving. Because what do leaders do? Leaders don't point out the problems. Leaders point out the solutions. So this is very important. It is very easy to talk about the problems. Here are the problems. And you will see a lot of people give you a litany of the problems and spend more time talking about the problems than the solutions. Why waste time with that? We already know the problems. Give us some ideas and solutions. So this is the beauty thing that I want each one of you to embrace. If you're going to be a leader, don't just point out the problem without also pointing out a possible solution to that problem at the same time. Your solution may not be right. It may not be the best. But as soon as you vocalize it and you express it, guess what will happen? You might get a reaction. Somebody will say, oh, no, for that problem I have this solution. But then you have a nice exchange, because leaders are also good listeners. If you don't listen, then what will happen is that through that constructive exchange of ideas, you may actually come up with a solution that neither of you could have done unless each of you interacted or engaged with each other in that way. This is how I started even in my childhood. I had a bunch of buddies that I would study with. And the best thing was each of us was good at something, and we would learn from each other. And that way what happened was, that group of my buddies, we were the top in the class. Had to be. Because we shared what we knew. I was very good at English, but I was not so good at math. There was somebody else that was better than me at math. So it was that person's job to teach us the math. And we would coach each other. That's what a good team does. I did not realize that right at that time I was developing my style of leadership through this knowledge model. And this is true leadership. Leadership is the simple act of giving somebody the empowerment and the knowledge to help them do whatever it is that they want to do. Leadership isn't ordering people around. That's being bossy or a supervisor. Again, very bad words. Don't ever be a boss. I was never a boss. I was always a leader. I had hundreds of people reporting to me, even right now. I probably have about 123 people reporting to me, but they don't work for me. They work with me. We all work for the students. We all work for the community. And that's a very big difference that leaders need to think and have. So the idea of leadership isn't to create a whole bunch of followers either. You want to create more leaders, because what do leaders do? They innovate like crazy because they're pursuing a passion. Leaders also want to run the organization with all the brains of the organization, because it is our diversity, it is our different skill sets that helps us come to the best solution. Even though we may think we are the smartest person in the world, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that. I sincerely believe every one of you should think you're the smartest person in the world. There's nothing wrong with that. Because if you don't have that self-pride, you can never be good at whatever it is that you're trying to do. You must always think you're the best in the world in whatever it is that you're trying to do. That's fine. But then also build and engage all the other brains, because they will help refine your thoughts. Managers, on the other hand, will use one brain. They'll tell you, this is the best way, this is the way it's always been done, here is the way, we have a 100-year history of doing it this same way. Pretty soon some of them actually go out of business, and they have. Tons and tons of companies, you can see their carcasses around the world. They've gone out of business because they refuse to adapt and change and take ideas. Just because something worked, they thought it would work forever. So leaders also, another big thing is the leaders will focus on the goals typically, but they won't necessarily focus on the process. Managers, on the other hand, are very interested in the process. I never cared about the process if it got me to the goal. And we shouldn't. Right? We should be very, very passionate about the goal. If the goal is a good goal, we should be very passionate about reaching that goal. But at the same time, we should be open to ideas about how to get there. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to build, this was in 2004, I wanted to build a replicated data center between two cities. And we couldn't afford it. But I wanted that goal. So I basically told my team members, please, just unleash your brains. Think of it. What can we do? This goal is so sacred that I don't want to sacrifice it. Well, it took one of my team members about 4 months to develop an innovative solution that did not exist anywhere else. And he was able to do it. It allowed me to build a replicated data center. So what we used to do is we used to do tapes that were being transported out of sight. But because we did replicated data centers and we did backups in each location, we never had to do the tape transport anymore. So we looked at all those cost reductions, and we were able to put all that money into this new solution that the person had come up with. So that's what is called innovation. And those are the kinds of people that I've always had in the organization. I've never laid off anybody. That's another thing that is very, very dangerous. If a CEO always has a perpetual layoff mentality in that organization, what are they going to do? They're going to kill innovation. They're going to kill loyalty. The very first time you have a layoff, you're a dead organization, trust me. I've been through those organizations where there have been layoffs. First layoff kills innovation, kills loyalty forever. So be very careful about that, and also don't taint your history. It is very important to carry that history with pride. I have never had a layoff in my organization. Isn't that a powerful statement for a CEO to be able to say? There are companies like that. Watch how they do it. A company that you will be very familiar with, Southwest Airlines. They are actually a chapter in my book. Very ethical company, never had a layoff, but they also never had a quarter with a loss. Even after September 9/11, they were the only airline in the United States that actually made a profit in the quarter following 9/11. Unbelievable. So read their story also. How did that happen? Their story is very simple. They had a single principle: do the right thing. Ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is very simple. It is the concept of sharing the fruits of innovation with the people that helped you get there. And that's something that I've always practiced. I was always fair and ethical about the compensation. My people never had to worry about their raises. Whatever I could afford, whatever was in my budget, we shared it equitably. They already had goals that they could meet. If they met those goals, it was money in the bank for them. And that's the way to run a company, because people are more excited about positive stimulus than negative. If you tell them, I'm going to fire you if you do this, is that incentive? Is that inspiration? No. But even simple things like, I'm going to take you out to lunch if you can do this within whatever. Wow, even that little thing is a huge bonus. Even a simple thank you and a handshake with sincerity can inspire somebody. This is the problem. That we have taught people to think of leadership where you basically are swinging your employer around like a golf ball and bat club. That's crazy. Instead, why not nurture them? Pour a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of water, a little bit of love and care, and get to know them as a human being. Because what happens if we get to know each other as human beings? The moment you establish a relationship, and it's a happy one, it's a good one, lots of positive chemicals are going to start flowing through your body. Those chemicals are actually inspirational chemicals. When you're happy, you will be more creative than when you're sad or under a lot of stress. Because when you're sad and under a lot of stress, what happens? A completely different set of chemicals start to flow. We are chemical human beings. When those stress chemicals flow through your body, your brain, so some of you are in the medical field, you probably know the concept of the amygdala hijack condition. There's a little thing in our back of our brain, the amygdala. When the amygdala takes over our consciousness, that's called the amygdala hijack condition. At that point, we're like an animal. This is why people will often murder even their best friend or spouse in a fit of rage or anger. Because when we're angry, also we are suffering from an amygdala hijack condition. So be very careful about that. Don't put people under stress, because that means they're going to be in perpetual amygdala hijack condition. And all these negative chemicals are flowing through the body. The brain actually shuts down to about 50% of its capacity, 30 to 50% of its capacity. That is deadly. Why would you want to do that? So that is the difference between being a boss and a leader. Also, if you're working for a boss like that, it's bad for your health. You will actually reduce your life expectancy if you continue working in those kinds of circumstances. So it's very important that you start building a brand and multiple sources of income, so that if you need to leave a job, you find a job, better job. There are at least half of the companies, at least in the United States, have terrific leaders and CEOs. I've met them. They're amazing people. So, given that we're in the cybersecurity field, you should actually have a lot of choice of employers. And you yourselves should be able to build these ethical companies. I believe that the next generation of CEOs will come from these digital leaders. Because as I said before, we are in a completely different era. This is a digital era. This is not about finance anymore. As a matter of fact, you don't need CFOs anymore in any company. You need digital leaders. If you want to eliminate a position, CFO is probably the position that I would eliminate, because I still haven't found the value that they create. Because it doesn't take rocket science to manage a budget. It also doesn't take a lot of intelligence to lay off a whole bunch of people to balance or show a profit. Right? You can do that too. You do need accountants, but you don't necessarily need a CFO. But today, you cannot do without a digital strategist or a cybersecurity professional. There is no company in the world that can do that. And it isn't all about protection, and you will see very soon why. So the problem with this leadership literature is that they haven't been teaching leadership this way. They have been teaching leadership where they put leaders on a pedestal. Oh my God. If you're going to be a leader, you have to have these 20 different characteristics, and oh, by the way, you also have to have charisma. So then you start thinking, my God, I don't have 20, maybe I might have 2 or 3 of these characteristics to talk about, and I certainly don't have charisma, so I must not be a leader. This is what they teach. And so that model has to go. In this new knowledge era, that model has to go. We're also sometimes confusing authority with leadership. So somebody in power, CEO, we say they're leaders. No, they just happen to be the CEO. They have some authority and power. They're not necessarily leaders yet. Until I meet with them, I won't know if that person is a leader or not. Right? We should also not confuse leadership with celebrity. So I'm a movie star. Suddenly that doesn't make me a cybersecurity professional, and I shouldn't be talking about cybersecurity. So in other words, you must stay in your lane of expertise. I have lots of opinion about lots of things. I try to stay away from those topics. You must stay in your lane. Because the other thing is that you also don't want to shrink your market. If you're a musician, even though you have a huge influence and you have a brain, is it wise for you to take political sides? I don't think so. Because the moment you do, you're going to carve your market out. So you are a cybersecurity professional. Do you care what party somebody belongs to? You should never care about that. Yes, you might have political preferences, but keep that private. Because your market is everybody. You should be willing to serve everybody. You should be completely agnostic about religion, party, and those kinds of things, because that's not your lane. That's the way I operate. Whoever wants to be successful using cybersecurity strategy, I'm willing to help. I don't care what their religious beliefs or political beliefs are. As long as their goal is ethical. I will never help somebody do something unethical. So that's where the values come in. And I recommend that you also follow that. Because the moment you try to do that, what will happen? Even if they pay you a lot of money, what will happen? It'll create a huge danger for your career. You also don't want to be in a situation where you're working for unethical bosses, where they might be looking for a scapegoat, where if there is a breach or something, they're going to have somebody to finger point. Because you are the cybersecurity professional. Aren't you in charge of security? No, but I told you to do this, but you didn't give me the money to do it. Well, nobody's going to ask about that question. And there are hundreds of my friends that have been laid off and fired like that for doing the right thing, even though it might have been the CFO or the CEO that actually shut them down and didn't allow them to do the things. It happened to me too, because I used to report to a CFO in my early days as a Chief Information Officer. It's a horrible situation to be in. So, the other thing is ethics. In many curriculum, ethics is taught as a concept, but it is not shown how ethical leadership is profitable for business. That connection has to be made, because otherwise, if you just teach ethics as a concept, it won't resonate with people. So when we teach ethical leadership, when I teach ethical leadership, I tie it to the profitability of the business. It is essential for that business, where I show how you, by sharing the profits, you have to have profits, but you can't take it all. That's not capitalism, that's oligarchy. Right? Capitalism means equitable. Oligarchy means I'm the owner, so I take all the profits. So ethics need to be tied to profitability. So this is the curriculum issue, that they don't teach you digital strategy in many business curriculum. So why is Willis College a game changer? Because now you are going to learn digital strategy as part of your core curriculum. Don't you think it is high time that other colleges that teach include that as part of the core curriculum? Wouldn't it be fair to the students that are coming up in this new world? See, the world that you are graduating into is going to be very different than the world that we graduated into. You will be making your mark in things that don't exist. And you have to know digital strategy, because it's all about digital today. Everything, news, publishing, learning, everything is digital, even marketing, which I just talked about, is all digital. And most of it is available at low cost. So many of the programs, examine the programs, and you are going to be leaders in the community as you go out. Examine the programs. I mean, tell others to examine the programs of the school they're going to attend. Is that up to date? When was the last time they updated the curriculum? And oh, by the way, does it include digital strategy? Does it include ethical leadership? This we just covered already, which is that you have to have that emotional component in there. Many business schools will actually tell you to discard your emotions because you can't be a CEO if you have emotions. My philosophy is, no, we are human beings. Emotions are what make us human, and you will notice that anytime you try to do something unethical, we have a chemical reaction, because it's our emotions being our ethical barometer. So we should be guided by our emotions. We shouldn't try to control them. Of course we can control them. Human beings are amazingly powerful. We can control our emotions, but if we control it too much, we cease to be humans. And that's part of the problem. In many business schools, they are telling CEOs. So what you have now is a cadre of CEOs that are completely unemotional and have no apathy for other human beings that they are laying off left and right or mistreating left and right. That's called a psychopath. There's a book called The Rise of the Psychopath. It actually talks about this phenomenon, where we have really cultivated a breed of leaders and executives who basically have no human emotions anymore. That's not a good thing. We need to be very careful about that. The other thing is that this is high time for change. In the accounting system, so where does a profit for a company comes from? The profit of a company comes from where I hire you and you produce, say, $200,000 worth of value, but I pay you $100,000. I have just made $100,000 worth of profit, because every human being has to produce more than what we pay them, because otherwise there would be no point in hiring. Anytime we buy something, we're always making that calculation. Is the value higher than the price that we're paying? And if the value is not higher than the price, we would never hire somebody. So it is a given that whenever anybody is hired, that person is going to produce far more than what we pay them. Right? Okay. So if that is the case, why is human capital only treated as an expense in the accounting system? Notice that the value that they produce is nowhere reflected in the accounting system. Yet if you buy a machine or a building, it's called a capital asset. Humans, even though they pay lip service and they say, oh, humans are my capital, but do you have a human capital department or do you have a human resource department? Why do you have a human resource department? Why don't you have a human capital department and actually recognize the value that each of your employees pay, so that when you have that layoff, it just doesn't reduce your expenses, but it also should reduce your future profits and capital. So think about the accounting system, how obsolete it is. So this we've covered. What has happened as a result of that? At least in the United States, where I studied the results. Here's what has happened. The results have been that more money is now spent on potato chips in the United States than the US government devotes to energy research and development. In 2009, for the first time, over half of US patents were awarded to non-US companies. China has far more people than the United States. India has far more people than the United States. So the same percentage of the population of India and China are innovating as the United States, we lose the game. So the only way the United States was able to do this was because of the pervasive blessing of capitalism. We truly had capitalism where everybody got to enjoy the fruits of their hard work, and so therefore they were innovating like crazy. That has actually declined, big time. China has already replaced the US as the world's #1 high-tech exporter. Yet we invented the computer. The internet started in the United States, and yet today China is the #1 technology exporter. That's crazy. Between 1996 and 1999, 157 new drugs were approved in the US, and then 10 years later that number had dropped to 74. So this is actually true, that the innovation in the United States half is what used to be in the 1970s. And essentially what has happened since the 1970s is that rise of that layoff era. The rise of the people with finance backgrounds running companies. They would often go to companies where that's all they cared about was the money factor. They actually even forgot about the mission. But you see, companies exist for a social benefit. The mission is important. Of course money is important. Of course profits is important. You have to make profits, otherwise you cannot survive. But the mission is far more important. You've got to take care of that customer, the client, and you've got to take care of your employees. So this is the other thing that has been going on at about the same time. If you look at the curve, basically this example shows you, in the 1980, for example, in the United States, a typical CEO was making about 42 times the typical worker's salary. By the time we reached 2014, look at the ratio. 400 to 1, where it was 42 to 1. So that means the US companies are amazingly successful, amazingly profitable. But the profits are being sucked out by the people in power. This is the biggest cause for this decline in innovation, productivity, and it also has a huge macroeconomic effect, which is that consumers don't have that power anymore. So a lot of the US economy now has to rely on external markets, and that's what they have been doing. But you see, we have, and every company, every country actually has a huge internal market. As long as your people are being paid ethically and there is ethical distribution of wealth according to contribution. So in other words, one of the things is you will hear a lot of people talk about socialism and redistribution of income. I am never talking about that. I have always talked about income according to contribution, not income according to your power. That is ethical leadership. This trend goes on. Innovation spending is declining big time in the United States. In other places, it's actually dramatically increasing. This is the China curve. China recognized that you have to have some capitalism in order to grow. Russia did the same thing. But actually, they could do even better if they had true capitalism. If they embraced true capitalism, they could do even better. So my recommendation is those countries that are out there already with capitalism and democracy, don't ever give that up, but understand ethical leadership, understand what true capitalism is all about, and what the new CEOs of the world will need to do. We have already talked about that, and you know the results of that also. That in the cybersecurity realm, what have we had with this kind of mentality, where people are not taking care of people or the data, massive breaches, and oh, by the way, they're always blaming somebody in some foreign country. But that's ridiculous. Why don't they blame themselves? If you leave the window open, is it the thief's fault that the thief came in and stole your goods? You left the door open. Now you're going to blame the thief? No, you have to have some due diligence. But that's what you're going to do. So essentially, my students and I, we studied breaches. So as we do the educational curriculum, one of the things that we do is we make people study case studies. Study the breach. What happened? What happened? And time after time after time, we find that it's the lack of leadership, it's the lack of governance, it's the failure to understand what your mission was, spending money on completely nonsense stuff and forgetting about the critical stuff. So for example, Equifax. The data of all the people with their credit scores, isn't that the #1 asset for that company? So how come that CEO had no clue about that? I don't know how many of you saw the CEO's interviews on TV. If you ever get a chance, see that. One of the most clueless CEOs I've ever seen that didn't understand digital strategy or that the data was the business of the organization. So how come you're not protecting your most critical assets properly? They were worried about other things. And the sad part about the whole thing is that these people who didn't do the right thing actually suffer no consequences either. They usually get a golden parachute. So this is another area where we should look at, where we create an environment where people are actually penalized. They should be taken to jail for doing this kind of behavior. And yet, sometimes the laws are so weak, just some breach notification, they're going to do some credit monitoring for you for about a year, 2 years, 3 years. What does that do? Your life may be ruined. So there's opportunity in creating ethical laws also. So what is the answer? The answer is for each of you to learn the right way. This is what my goal has been, to do this. Educate digital strategists, focus on people being the source of innovation. People-powered perpetual innovation. That's what you want to foster. And cybersecurity, view that as an innovation culture, because you will see very soon when I talk about the cybersecurity model that cybersecurity is all about perpetual innovation. And make education holistic and interdisciplinary. So in every discipline, you need to have all those skills that I talked about, the leadership skills, the communication skills, the team building skills, ethical leadership, all of that has to be infused in every curriculum, because I don't care what you find your passion in, you need those things to be successful. So now let's go into cybersecurity and the role of leadership within cybersecurity. So how are we doing so far? So far, everything is resonating? Okay. Great.
You talk about education and awareness.
Aha, great question. So when we talk about education, do we talk about awareness? No. So I'm going to talk about that just a second when we go into the model. As I was saying before, the technology has changed the world, right? We were using technology in finance, accounting, and payroll before, but now it is driving the mission of the organization. It is doing everything for us. Everybody handles data. We talked about this. We also talked about the fact that all this technology is available to you for free. So what is happening with the role of IT and IT executives is that they're no longer worried about just keeping the systems running. That's not IT's function or a cybersecurity leader's function. It is to power the business, to use it as a strategic tool, and also to develop risk strategy. So they're going from computer rooms to boardrooms. And in cybersecurity, it is not about just keeping the door shut from people from China or Russia. It's about these goals. These are the 4 key goals. Actually 3, but let's keep privacy aside for a second. Let's talk about confidentiality first. Simple concept of confidentiality is that authorized people should have access to information. Unauthorized people should not have access to that information. And that unauthorized people could be within your organization. They don't have to be in China, they don't have to be Russia, right? So that's a simple concept of confidentiality. The right people can access information. The second important concept that we worry about is the integrity of information, which is the truthfulness. Because why do we have information? We have information to be able to make decisions based on that information. So if the information doesn't have integrity or honesty or truthfulness, then our decisions are going to be flawed. And that's happening, right? People are actually feeding you false data, false information all the time. Then we have to worry about the concept of availability, which is that information should be available to you when you need it, from the locations you need, and during the time that you need it. So information should be as planned. That's the key. Now let's talk about privacy. What is the issue of privacy? Privacy is simply that there is a law behind it. Privacy is legislated confidentiality. This is my simplest way to explain privacy. A lot of people are going to start talking about legal concepts. Don't worry about any of that. Cybersecurity encompasses everything, including privacy. We as cybersecurity professionals actually have to worry about the laws because there are certain laws that might be protecting certain kinds of data. And if there's a privacy law behind it, then that privacy law actually grants the owner of the data some rights. And if I have a breach, I have some notification requirements, I might have some fines, all kinds of issues like that. So that's the concept of privacy. Going to the model, this model was built over almost 20 plus years. It started out with what is called the Macomber Cube in 1991. And that is when John Macomber said that information exists in these 3 states: processing state, storage state, or transmission state. And he also said that you have confidentiality, integrity, and availability as the goals. Okay? But in 1991, he said, we use 3 tools to do it. One is technology, and he put technology first, then policy, and then he said training and awareness in 1991. In 1991, there was no concept of time. If you go to the John Macomber Cube, you will see that there is no time arrow there. In 2001, 4 scholars, Dr. McConaughey, Shu, Ragsdale, and Welch, they developed what is called the Information Assurance Model in 2001. That didn't have the bottom yellow part. But they said, we have to have non-repudiation, we also have to have authentication. They also said, training and awareness is not sufficient. Because just making somebody aware of something doesn't get to change their behavior. At that point, they have no incentive in changing behavior. They don't understand it. Cybersecurity means nothing to them. So yes, we can make them click a lot of things and put them through videos, and we can check the box of we did awareness training, but that is a complete waste of money and time. What works is job-related productivity training and engaging the person and and helping them view that, okay, you may handle certain data. Somebody else handles completely different data because their role is different. A good example is a doctor and a nurse. They usually will handle different kinds of data. Or an intake person at a hospital is going to handle different kinds of data compared to, let's say, a physician, right? So depending on their job role, don't we already train them in something? Everybody that we have in any job is already undergoing training. So why don't we tie the protection of data or the safety of data with that job function and also use it as a productivity. My job will be to make you more productive as whatever role you're playing. Now you will have the incentive to do it right. You will then also have the ability to ask me some questions. But this is my problem. You're telling me to do this way, but if I do it that way, it's going to reduce my productivity by half an hour. And then we're going to have an exchange. Oh, that's what I'm going to do. Then we need to figure out a way how we don't ding you for that half an hour. We've got to figure out how maybe you actually save half an hour rather than this is how I approached technology. So I never called it cybersecurity training. Cybersecurity was not a word. I still don't use it when I do job-related training. Because cybersecurity is a bad word to anybody who's not a cybersecurity professional. So to doctors, I talked about patient data safety. Completely aligned. Because their language is what? Patient safety. They love patient safety. At the nuclear power plant, we're doing plant data safety. Because, again, safety was a big culture in the company already. So you have to tie whatever it is that you're doing with the existing culture. Don't put additional burden on that person. The moment you do that, you will fail. You will see awareness training, we have spent billions of dollars on awareness training. Now, the awareness training companies are going to hate you hate me for saying that. Phishing companies are going to hate me for saying that. But phishing doesn't work. The same person that we have just gone through a phishing test or whatever will still fall for whatever. So what they said was we have to engage the people in, at that time, they didn't use the word governance yet. That's the word that I later adopted in 2014. That in order to get the people engaged, what you have to do is do the leadership. Because people are powerful. A lot of smart people running helter-skelter could cause mass pandemonium. So what leadership does is helps them understand the mission. Now they're focused on a goal, like a team. And so leadership, so what I always did was I tied the human brains towards a mission. Got them excited about the mission. Now they're willing to, and not only that, they also enjoyed coming to work because they said, oh, I helped increase enrollment by XYZ%, or I actually saved 10 lives today. There was a time that I was working for the health insurance exchange. It was unbelievable. There was all kinds of problems going on. Every time I solved a problem, I got a great feeling because, oh my God, somebody just got health insurance. You see, that's the way we need to think. It's not that we solved a technology problem, because there's a human being or some good benefit coming out at the end of the day. And that's what we got to get people excited about. Now, so they said this, that we have to do that. They also said a very critical thing, this time dimension. They said that cybersecurity or information assurance is not a state. It is a perpetually innovating process, because the moment you stay static, even if you have the best technology, best environment in the world, somebody is going to get in because they are innovating. They're trying to figure out that hole or whatever. But if you keep changing the goalpost, guess what? Other people are going to be befuddled. But that is the beauty of that innovation, is as you innovate, you're also going to advance your business. So that's what they said. Now that was 2001. Then in 2013, I finished my doctoral degree. And during that time, I also understood that I had already worked as a Chief Information Officer for 12 years when I went into the doctoral program. And I knew that the biggest problem wasn't that there wasn't all this knowledge out there. The issue was that there was no mission focus, because too many people didn't understand. They were trying to do the same thing in every company. But I said, no. The mission of a healthcare company, the mission of an education company, the mission of a mom and pop pizza shop is completely different. So the strategy has to be tailored to the mission. And knowledge has to be based upon prior knowledge. I cannot ignore the knowledge of the scholars that came before me. And even when I impart my knowledge, other scholars have to validate and say, yeah, that makes sense. So as a matter of fact, when I added mission, risk, and governance to the model, I had lengthy conversations with Dr. McConaughey and Dr. Ragsdale. And I said, I was very respectful. Dr. McConaughey was actually part of my dissertation committee. So I was very fortunate that that happened. And because I was doing this, I wanted to make sure that my gurus, my mentors, were not offended that I was adding to their model that had lived for such a long time. But this is the beautiful thing about the leaders, that Dr. McConaughey and Dr. Ragsdale both said, Mansur, we gave you the doctoral degree so that you can do exactly what you're doing, adding to the knowledge. That is exactly why we gave you the doctoral degree. So they were so great. They said, actually, we were thinking about this for the last 15 years. We just never got around to it. We were just so busy. So we're very glad that you did it. So they both embraced this model. As a matter of fact, I have shared this model in both business communities as well as academic scholars. And they all said, yeah, that makes sense. Absolute sense. Because risk is of two types, positive and negative, and I have to balance it. This is not a technology discipline, this is a business discipline. Notice what we have discussed, we haven't discussed no technology at all almost, right? It's all about strategy, it's all about business, it's all about mission. So do you see how cybersecurity is a business discipline? And it is unlike any other discipline. We actually can use the brains of people from any discipline within this discipline, because it's all about business. It's all about running countries, running businesses, running economies. That's what cybersecurity is. So based on that model, I've also given you this formal definition of cybersecurity. And notice that when you offer a definition, that definition must be supported by a model. You just cannot come up with a definition from thin air. So notice this definition is very carefully chosen. Cybersecurity is the mission-focused and risk-optimized governance of information which maximizes confidentiality, integrity, and availability using a balanced mix of people, policy, and technology while perennially improving over time. Notice also the careful use of the word information and not information systems or technology or anything like that. Because guess what? I believe information in people's minds and their brains are just as important as information residing on a disk or a tape or paper. And you as a cybersecurity professional, as a leader, have to worry about that. This is why I never laid off people. Because what was in their brains and their minds was far more valuable than any money in the world. Because I had invested my time and energy in grooming them to where they were. Why would I want to lose that? Isn't that insanity? That is total insanity. That is almost like killing your child. You nurture that child from a baby to adulthood. You don't want to discard that thing that you worked so hard to produce, where now it's actually going to give you back the rewards. It's going to give you those hugs. You don't have to change diapers anymore. It's the same thing with people and employees. Same thing. No difference at all. So as you explain cybersecurity to others, tell them cybersecurity is the digital strategy of organizations. And how would you describe yourself? What are you? If you are going through a cybersecurity curriculum, what are you?
Leader.
Exactly. You are a cybersecurity leader. Beautiful. You are also, another word you can use, I am a digital strategist. You will wow people with those words, because then they're going to ask you, what does that mean? Because they haven't heard these words before. And that's when you can explain. I use digital strategy and technology to power your organization forward. And that's why you want to hire me. Cybersecurity, isn't it about hackers? You say no. Cybersecurity is what will make your company great. And I know that. I know cybersecurity leadership. It's not all about technology. I know how to engage all the brains in your organization in a virtuous cycle of perpetual innovation. You say those words to any CEO, they're going to hire you. And if they don't, that's not a CEO you want to work for. Or with, right? I mean, anybody who tells me they're going to engage all the brains in my company and power my mission forward, how could I not hire that person? Imagine the value, because it's not just one person. They're going to make all the people in my company more productive and valuable. That's what a cybersecurity professional does. So do you see the power of what you're learning? Everybody who's embracing cybersecurity leadership, do you see the power of that learning? It is the most powerful, and that's why it's a game changer. As educational institutions embrace this, they're going to be game changers. Let's go into how do we do cybersecurity culture building. So the way I did it was adopting a set of values. First of all, for myself, and then for the team that I was leading. And these were the values I used. I thought integrity was very important. Then empowerment. Empowerment simply means that you should be allowed to make decisions within your realm of expertise. There's no reason to come back to somebody else for a decision. Right? I need to coach everybody, empower them. Also, empowerment means challenging authority, challenging, if I say something wrong, you should be free to say, hey, Mansur, I don't really agree with what you're saying. Great, give me a reason. We talk about it. That's empowerment. I always had that in my organizations. Everybody was free to criticize me directly to me. What I hated was, and I told them that this could be grounds for termination, if you start bad-mouthing your team members to others outside the organization, other members of the public. That is not teamwork. That is not constructive. If you haven't criticized your team member directly or to me, don't criticize that team member to somebody else. That's bad-mouthing. That's completely bad. That's toxic. Not allowed. Customer service. We talked about customer service. Because without customers, no business can exist. And it isn't about creating a monopoly. It is about loving the customer, because what is the customer going to do? Don't try to ever be the cheapest person around. What sells? Value. So to the customer, if you give unbelievable level of service, the perception of value of that service goes up in the minds of the customer. Now they're going to be willing to pay you a higher price. As a matter of fact, in everything that I have done throughout my whole life, I was never the cheapest person around. But I always gave good value. For whatever they were paying me, I made sure that I delivered at least 2-3 times higher than that value, or at least the perception. My customer should feel that that's what they got. That maybe they got something priceless. And that's very important. Continuous improvement. I said that if you can unleash that culture and that mindset in every human being that is around you. Wow. Your organization will benefit, your society will benefit, everybody will benefit. It would be absolutely amazing. And then this positive reinforcement, because as human beings, we love a thank you. We love a handshake. We love when somebody says, great job. And so positive reinforcement actually inspires people to do more and more of those great things. So as a leader, what do we have? We have a limited supply of financial rewards that we can give people. But in terms of non-financial rewards, do we have any limits? Is there a budget for non-financial rewards? No. So why don't we be generous about that? Can we be generous about that? And you will see, unfortunately, too many people in authority, because they're not leaders, are very stingy with not only monetary rewards, but also the non-monetary rewards. But if you're going to be a true leader, make sure you understand that you have those two banks of things that you can give. And my people knew that. And they knew, and I would tell them honestly, I have limits on the amount of monetary rewards I can give you, but the non-monetary rewards are unbelievable. They can also be flexibility in coming to work, some telecommuting options. If they have a child or a parent or a grandparent to take care of, couldn't they adjust their schedule a little bit? Isn't this a technologically enabled work? Do we care where they're working from? They don't. Most people don't usually come to work. They are working from where they are, right? So that, and then giving them their vacations. I'm not a big believer in 10, 12, 14-hour workdays. That's crazy. People have burnout. Their productivity will go down. So you make sure that you give them generous vacations and holidays and make them take it. Matter of fact, people were not allowed to work overtime on my teams. I didn't allow that unless there was an emergency, a critical need, and so on and so forth. So the whole thing is, what can cybersecurity leadership achieve? Hopefully, what we've discussed now, you can see that when you engage everybody, essentially you will have better cybersecurity. You will also use the appropriate technology, because people will select the technology. The wrong people will select the wrong technology. And if you don't have any people, who's going to configure the technology? The right people will configure the technology properly. They will take care of the technology. They will change out the technology when the technology becomes obsolete. They will also train others to use it properly, because technology's power isn't in the technology itself. It's in how productive and innovative it makes other people. And how are you going to become productive? Even simple things like Word, Excel, if you use those things, but if somebody doesn't ever train you in that, you won't be as productive. So during my entire career, as I implemented any technology, I spent a lot of time, and my team members spent a lot of time in training everybody around. And how did we do this? So, share a story about the nuclear power plant. The nuclear power plant had 2,500 people. We were building a brand new network within literally about 6 months time frame. And now we have to train 2,500 people to use that network effectively. I had a 3-member team, including myself. How am I going to train 2,500 people? So here's where my political science brain kicked in. And I said, most political parties would create a grassroots organization. So what I did was, I looked at the organization and I saw the 2,500 people. There were essentially about 100 business units. So my team members and I went to every supervisor, all 100 of them, and we said, can we get somebody from your team to be like a local area network coordinator It will not be a full-time job, maybe 4 to 8 hours a week, but essentially we will be training them to be super users of the network and the technology we're building, and they will also help your team members use that technology properly for your business, because that person knows your environment better than any of us could ever do. So this is not about technology training, it's about using that technology to make that business unit better. Oh my God, everybody loved it. Pretty soon, I had 100 LAN coordinators. The three of us, we would have LAN coordinator conferences almost every month, have all these training sessions, gave them out certificates. Once again, the non-monetary rewards. We couldn't afford a lot of payment, but we could afford certificates, beautiful printout certificates. And so they could go around, I'm a LAN coordinator. It launched so many careers, it's unbelievable. This was long before there were help desks or any of those things. Many of those LAN coordinators became help desks and launched IT careers as a result of this. Today, what would you do? Today, you would have cybersecurity champions, digital champions. You could do the same thing. So if you are in a position where, let's say, you're the chief cybersecurity officer of a company, whichever company hires you, could you not do the same thing? Absolutely could. None of them have to report to you, but you are their leader. That's what leadership is all about, and that's what you're learning. You cannot do this alone. And the only way to engage the brains of everybody is to have massive levels of support for your work around the company that you're serving. So if it's a 1,000-member company, I would recommend that you create at least 40 or so. I would say 25, one data champion to 25 is a good ratio. For me, that ratio worked beautifully. You can experiment with that ratio. Sometimes you might find that 50 to 1 is also okay. I think it would be unwieldy because you really need that level of support and some depth, but you can work with that. And that's what will help you do this, the micro-innovation culture. Because those people in that business unit are going to go to the LAN coordinator or the data champion and say, hey, I can't do this properly. I need to do this better. Now that person is going to be telling the technology people or whoever is going to do the enablement. So now, when you're able to do this, guess what? You are also creating a massive level of support for your work. Your power will rise in the company. You will create a happier workforce. You will have less churn, huge retention of intellectual capital, better loyalty, and better cybersecurity. And that is really the way to run future businesses. Productivity gains, innovation gains, perennial success, and basically global leadership. The companies that do this are going to change the world. Almost all of this is available in my book and the curriculum. Thank you very much once again for your time and for coming here and for giving me this honor. And thank you to Rima Aristocrat and Willis College for implementing this curriculum and being the first in Canada to do this. And I hope that Rima and I will forge a good partnership so that we can take this worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.